Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. The world's oceans are filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes, from the tiniest of plankton to the largest animals on Earth. More than 2/3 of our planet is covered in water, and merely 5% of the world's oceans have been charted. With such a vast array of wildlife, and such a great portion of the world's seas and oceans remaining vastly unexplored, one begins to imagine, what could there be in the deep blue that mankind has not yet seen? Since mankind has sailed the seas, legends of monstrous creatures have appeared out of nautical folklore. This program will detail some of the most famous and most dangerous legendary monsters of the sea. Perhaps the most widespread sea monster in folklore is the sea serpent. As its name would suggest, the sea serpent is a gigantic aquatic snake, oftentimes depicted with dragon-like features. Like many dragons of legend, sea serpents are said to be quite temperamental, with stories of them attacking ships aplenty. Legends of the sea serpent are found all across the globe, varying in size and behavior. In Greek mythology, Laocoon is killed by a pair of sea serpents sent by the gods to stop him from interfering with the Greeks' plan to invade Troy. In biblical mythology exists Leviathan, a fire-breathing serpent large enough to create tsunamis just by moving, lurking in the deep ocean, waiting for the end of the world. Norse mythology tells of Jormungand, a sea serpent so large it can encircle the whole of the world in its coils, and still be able to bite the end of its tail. Japanese mythology tells of a yokai called the Akuchi, or Ayakashi, an eel-like creature said to be many kilometers in length, covered in slick oil. It is said to make a habit of enveloping boats in its many coils, slithering over the sides and decks, leaving trails of its slippery oil in its wake. In American folklore, reports of sea serpents are abundant along the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, such as the Gloucester sea serpent from Massachusetts. Many believe sea serpents to be real creatures, perhaps remnants from the age of dinosaurs, hiding from the world. From Greek mythology come stories of the Sirens, part woman, part bird creatures, who lured passing sailors with their enchanting singing voices to shipwreck on the rocky coasts of their island. The Sirens would then swoop down and eat the flesh of the sailors, both living and dead. Legend has it that the Sirens were the daughters of the river god Aeolus, and when their friend, the goddess Persephone, was taken to the underworld by Hades, they were punished by Demeter for not protecting her daughter, and she turned them into their monstrous forms. It is said that only 2 ships had ever sailed past the Sirens unharmed. The first was the Argo, sailed by Jason and the Argonauts. Though the Sirens sang beautifully and seemed to tempt the Argo's crew to their doom, they were surpassed by the music of Orpheus, who played even more beautifully than them. The Sirens then flung themselves into the sea and drowned, save the handful that slept that day. Their fate came when Odysseus made his journey home from Troy. Having been warned of the dangers the Sirens posed, Odysseus bade his crew to clog their ears with beeswax. However, Odysseus was curious to hear the siren's song, and ordered his men to tie him to the ship's mast, so he may hear their melodies, but not pose a danger to himself or the crew. He was enchanted by their voices, and shouted and cursed to his crew to release him. But alas, they could not hear him, nor the sirens. When Odysseus and his crew sailed past unmolested, the remaining sirens plunged into the sea. Whales are the largest animals on Earth, and while normally gentle giants, it is not uncommon for them to experience aggression, particularly while they are being hunted. This has led to stories of gigantic, monstrous variants called devil whales. The devil whale is said to be immense in size, dwarfing other whales and preying on them, even swallowing entire ships whole. Whaling ships that encounter it and try to hunt it wind up having the fight of their lives. The whale proceeds to destroy the ship, ramming its head through the hull, breaching the water and crashing down on the deck, and smashing rowboats with its massive tail. The legends of the devil whale and similar creatures have made their way into a number of nautical stories, such as Herman Melville's Moby Dick and Carlo Collodi's Adventures of Pinocchio. From Scottish folklore comes tales of the Kieran Crowen, a sea monster variously described as a great sea serpent, a large chthonic beast, or resembling an aquatic reptile of the dinosaur age. It was said to be so large and so vicious, it regularly ate 7 whales for its meal, and the only being capable of subduing a Kieran Crowen was the devil himself. Folklore gives this monster a unique hunting tool to compensate for its great size and aggressive nature. It has the power to shapeshift into a small silver fish, so that whales and other ocean predators will mistake it for easy prey, or otherwise a non-threatening creature. When its quarry is within range, the monster sheds its disguise and consumes them with gusto. This tactic is also said to be used on fishing vessels and other sailing ships, unleashing its wrath as soon as it's hooked or netted. The Hfkufa of Scandinavian legend is said to be the progenitor of all sea monsters. It fed on whales, ships, men, and anything it could catch. As per the Orvarod saga, the Hfkufa was said to have lived under the water. Its only physical description provided in the saga is its nose that stuck out of the water when the tide was low. Sailors passing by would often mistake its nose for 2 massive rocks rising from the sea, unaware of the beast that lurked beneath the tide. When on the hunt, the creature would belch and expel so much food that it would attract all nearby fish and ocean life, luring them to swim into its mouth. Once a large number had crowded into its mouth and belly, it would close its mouth and devour them all at once. A common theme among seafaring folklore is giant animals and monsters partially submerged while asleep, and passing sailors mistaking them for remote islands. While attributed to such large creatures like the devil whale, few are as famous for it as the Zaratan, also called the Jasconius, Aspidocalone, or Fastidocalone, featured in stories such as The Legend of St. Brendan and The First Voyage of Sinbad the Sailor in 1001 Nights. Mostly depicted as a larger-than-life sea turtle, though sometimes as a large whale or a fish. The Zaratan is said to spend the majority of its time submerged beneath the sea, eating fish and other marine life, only emerging to sleep. With unique flora and vegetation growing upon its back, and a shell that resembles stone, sailors would often mistake it for a small island. When the sailors would make camp on its back, the creature would awaken, sensing a fire lit, and immediately plunge into the depths, killing all atop its back. The creature would then proceed to eat any bodies floating in the water. Two of the greatest terrors of the Mediterranean Sea were Cilla and Charybdis, a monstrous pair that terrorized the Strait of Messina. Hailing from Greek mythology, Cilla and Charybdis were both once beautiful immortal maidens, a nymph and a goddess respectively, before they were transfigured by petty gods into a multi-headed monster and a living whirlpool. Cilla was a massive creature with 6 carnivorous heads attached to long necks, 12 tentacle-like feet, and an appetite for human flesh. Charybdis, variously described as either a submerged monster or a sentient whirlpool, would, thrice each day, draw in and push out large amounts of water with such force that ships would be engulfed. Cilla and Charybdis were said to live on opposite sides of a narrow strait of water, a distance measured at less than the flight of an arrow. No vessel could pass between Cilla and Charybdis unscathed, for if they avoided Charybdis, the vessel would be attacked by Cilla, plucking 6 sailors off the ship at a time. And if the vessel avoided Cilla, it would be swallowed by Charybdis. The combination of Cilla and Charybdis gave rise to an old saying of between Cilla and Charybdis, a saying that evolved into the more popular idiom, between a rock and a hard place. The hero Odysseus passed through the strait on his journey home, and with guidance from Circe, he sailed close towards Cilla, having resigned to the truth that losing 6 men would be better than to lose the entire ship. Cilla consumed 6 of his men as Odysseus and his crew rowed quickly away before it could strike again. In and around Falmouth Bay, off the coast of Cornwall, England, people have claimed for centuries to have seen the sea monster known as Morgar. Descriptions of Morgar tend to vary. Some say it looks reptilian, like a traditional sea serpent or the extinct Elasmosaurus. Others that it is more mammalian, with skin similar to a seal's. The most common features attested by witnesses are 3 large humps on its back, a long neck, and bristles or spines along the top of the creature's head and body. Since the late 19th century, alleged sightings of Morgar were commonly reported by local fishermen and tourists of the area. In the mid-1970s, reports of sightings were a near daily occurrence, with even photographic evidence in some cases. The most famous of these were photographs taken by a woman dubbed Mary F., who sent them to the local newspaper the Falmouth Packet. A more recent sighting, in 1999, came from John Holmes, an ex-employee from the British Museum of Natural History, who managed to capture video of what looks like a huge marine animal in Guerin's Bay near Cornwall. Many believe this to be proof of Morgar's existence, but skepticism remains high among experts. The Isonade, or Okuchiwani, of Japanese mythology, are mysterious shark-like monsters that scour the coastlines, searching for boats to scuttle and fishermen to eat. Their bodies are enormous. They have long whip-like tails and fins covered with countless tiny barbs, not unlike a real shark's, only amplified to mystical levels. They use these to hook their prey, dragging them deep into the water to be drowned and eaten. Despite their size, Isonade are incredibly elusive. They move through the sea with unparalleled grace and can swim without stirring the water. The only sign of impending attack from Isonade is that they only appear when the north wind blows violently south and slightly west across the Sea of Japan. If one happens upon a boat, it will use its barbed tail to drag sailors under the water to be devoured. Occasionally, they will venture near the shore and swipe their tails across the beach to catch prey, which is how they earn their name, as Isonade translates to beach stroker. In Greek mythology, Queen Cassiopeia of Ethiopia outwardly boasted that her daughter Andromeda was more beautiful than the Nereids, provoking the anger of the sea god Poseidon. In order to punish the queen for her blasphemy, Poseidon turned to the sea monster Cetus. Cetus is described as a gigantic, dragon-like monster, capable of breathing air and water, with vicious claws, a massive, whale-like body, and a serpentine tail split at the ends. Poseidon sent Cetus to lay waste to the city of Joppa, destroying the settlement and devouring the inhabitants. Upon consulting an oracle, Cassiopeia and her husband, King Cepheus, were forced to sacrifice Andromeda to the destructive creature. She was chained to a rock facing the ocean, and just as the monster reared its head to consume the maiden, the hero Perseus arrived on the scene and unleashed his secret weapon, the head of Medusa. Cetus's eyes locked with the deadly gaze of Medusa, and the beast was instantly turned to stone. Perseus went on to marry Andromeda, and Cetus was turned into a constellation. Perhaps the most famous monster of the sea is the Kraken. Originating in Scandinavian folklore, the Kraken is a gigantic cephalopod-like creature, similar in appearance to a squid or an octopus, albeit much larger. It is said to have immense tentacles, strong enough to suction a man's face clean off their head, and drag a ship down into the murky depths with little effort. Its preferred food is human flesh, and its breath is said to reek of 1,000 rotting corpses. Many nautical stories and works of art feature the Kraken attacking ships, coiling its tentacles around the hull, and picking off sailors like fish in a barrel. Some stories say that the beast has 1,000 tentacles, each up to a mile in length, and like the Hfkufa and the Zaratan, camouflages itself as an island, fooling vessels into believing it to be land, only for it to strike when its prey is within reach. For centuries, ships that disappeared or never returned to port were often blamed on the Kraken. As one may guess, legends of the Kraken were most likely exaggerated reports of giant squids or the colossal octopus. But some believe that in a remote part of the ocean lurks the Kraken, awaiting a wayward ship to sail through its clutches. The ocean is a mysterious and treacherous part of our planet, covering roughly 2/3 of its surface, much of which remains unexplored. In addition to the many, many animals living beneath the waves, what other creatures might exist in the bottomless fathoms? Ancient mariners and wayward sailors imagined a plethora of dangerous monsters that lurk in the deep. Monsters of immense size, of alluring presence, and some a vast carnivorous appetite. To those who seek to sail, keep a weathered eye on the horizon, and make sure that small island is in fact an island.